I never thought a quiet night shift could nearly cost me my life. It started with a decision I made months ago, one that seemed harmless, practical even. My name is Ishan, and for the last year and a half I've been living out of my RV, traveling across the states, working odd jobs, and collecting stories along the way. The freedom of the open road appealed to me in a way nothing else ever had. No rent, no roots, no rules. But that lifestyle, as freeing as it is, comes with its own price. Every few months I'd have to settle down temporarily to pick up some work, make enough to move on, and hit the road again. That's how I ended up in Oak Ridge, a small, dry, and mostly forgotten stretch of southern New Mexico. The kind of town you drive through without noticing unless you're running low on gas or lost with no signal. It was early winter. The sky remained stubbornly gray, the air unusually still. I parked my RV just outside of town in a half-abandoned trailer park and found a job at a gas station about 6 miles outside the city limits. It was one of those lone outposts on an old 2-lane highway, Station 47, the kind that still had faded signage and a mechanical register. There were no other businesses for miles, no restaurants or diners, just desert, power lines, and silence. The locals used this route to bypass highway traffic, but after dark, it was mostly a ghost road. The isolation didn't bother me. I liked the quiet. I liked the idea that the world forgot about places like this. That night, my shift was from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., a full graveyard. I didn't mind it. Night shifts meant fewer people, fewer questions. Just me, the humming of the old coolers, and the occasional moth flinging itself against the buzzing overhead lights. 12:48 a.m. The store was silent. I had finished restocking the snacks and was halfway through rearranging the cigarette packs behind the counter when I saw headlights roll into the parking lot. A 1990s dark blue sedan, dusty and low, parked in one of the 3 spaces right up front. I moved behind the counter, tried to look casual. The man who stepped out looked to be in his late 30s, medium height, dark green flannel jacket, jeans, unshaven. His hair was messy like he hadn't combed it in days. As he stepped through the automatic door, he nodded with a polite, almost forced smile. "Evenin'," he muttered, his voice raspy. "Evenin'," I replied, keeping it simple. He drifted into the aisles, whistling softly. I recognized the tune. It was something old, maybe a classic rock song, but slower. Offbeat. He picked up a can of beans, turned it in his hand, then put it back. Then a bag of chips. Then a bottle of soda. Always whistling, always moving slowly. There was something about his rhythm. Too slow to be browsing, too fast to be stalling. I kept an eye on him, discreetly. I'd worked retail long enough to recognize odd behavior, but this wasn't textbook shoplifting, this was something else. And then just like that he left. No purchase, no goodbye, just walked out and got back into his car. I exhaled a breath I didn't know I was holding. I watched through the window as he leaned into the back seat of his car. He stayed there for a while, too long. Then he got out, this time with more purpose, and walked straight back inside. 1:12 a.m. "Hey," he said with a grin. "Tires are a little low. Couldn't see no pump out there. Y'all got one?" "No air pump outside," I replied, keeping my tone light. "But I got a portable one. Hang on." I pulled the handheld compressor from under the counter. Part of me wanted to say no. Something in my gut tightened when I looked at him again. His eyes were a little too wide, too bright for 1 a.m. But I told myself I was being paranoid. Just help the guy and move on. We walked to his car. He pointed to the rear driver's side tire. I crouched, clipped the compressor on, and checked the pressure. Normal. "Looks fine," I said as I looked up. That's when I saw it. His fist, mid-swing. It connected with the side of my face so hard I hit the ground before I even registered the pain. My ears rang. I tasted blood. Before I could even react, his boot slammed into my ribs. Again. Again. I curled up, arms over my head. "Stop!" I screamed. Another kick. Another. Everything was spinning. My chest burned, I couldn't breathe. The last thing I saw before my vision blurred completely was the moon, cold and distant. Then silence. Then the scrape of a blade. He was above me, kneeling. And then I felt it, the cold press of steel against my neck, and the cut. It wasn't deep, but it was enough to make my skin burn and the warmth of blood to rush out over my chest. I thought I was dead. I lay still, didn't move. I knew if I did, he'd finish the job. My hands were at my throat, trying to stop the blood. It wasn't spraying, it was oozing. A good sign, I guessed. Or maybe it just meant it would take longer to die. He walked back into the store. I heard him trashing the place. Cans falling, the register opening, coins hitting the floor. Then silence. Then footsteps. Back toward me. I stopped breathing. Played dead. My heart pounded so hard I thought he'd hear it. Then the car door slammed. The engine turned. Tires squealed. He was gone. 1:43 a.m. I staggered to my feet. Somehow. My legs barely worked. I made it inside, grabbing onto the shelves like a drunk. The store was a mess, like a storm had blown through. I saw my phone behind the counter. I grabbed it with slippery, blood-soaked fingers. Dialed 911. All I could say was, gas station, throat, help. Then, darkness. I woke up in a hospital bed, tubes in my arms. A nurse leaned over me, eyes wide. "He's awake," she yelled, rushing out. I touched my throat. Bandages. I was alive. Barely. The doctor later told me the knife missed my jugular by less than a centimeter. He had aimed wrong. The fat in my neck, the same fat I'd always hated, had somehow saved my life. I was in shock. Gratitude didn't even begin to cover it. That man was never caught. The police tried, but there were no plates on the car, no usable prints. Nothing on the cameras either. They were too old, too grainy. He vanished, like a ghost in the night. I haven't worked a night shift since. I don't think I ever will. Living in an RV still gives me freedom. But now, every time I park for the night, I double-check every lock, every light. I sleep with a knife under my pillow and a baseball bat within arm's reach. Because I've learned something. The scariest monsters aren't hiding under your bed. They're the ones who smile, nod politely, and ask if you can help them with their tire. I still remember the first time I worked a solo overnight shift at St. Luke's Regional in Oregon. My name's Emily Carter, and I've been a registered nurse in the intensive care unit, ICU, for just over 3 years. St. Luke's isn't a huge hospital. We're not some high-tech urban trauma center, but we see our fair share of tough cases. And working the ICU means most of the people I care for are hanging somewhere between life and death. Some nights it's all ventilators, alarms, and rushing from bed to bed. Others are quiet enough to hear the old AC unit rattle down the hall. But no matter the night, the weight of the job is always there. Physical, emotional, spiritual. This job changes you. You learn how to keep it together. You learn how to compartmentalize. But sometimes a patient gets through your armor. It was last fall when I first met Walter Green, a retired high school music teacher. 82, with a kind face, warm eyes, and the slow, calm speech of someone who'd spent decades teaching teenagers how to breathe through their diaphragm. He was admitted with severe sepsis from a bacterial infection that had gone undiagnosed too long. His condition was serious, but he was lucid, charmingly so. From day one, Walter was the kind of patient you don't forget. He'd ask me about my day, joke with the techs, hum old jazz tunes under his breath. He called me kiddo, which usually would bug me. But from him, it felt comforting, like I was someone's granddaughter again. What broke my heart was that he'd just lost his wife, Eleanor, 2 weeks before being admitted. 56 years of marriage, he told me. She made the best apple cobbler in Oregon, he said once with a tear and a laugh. He spoke about her constantly, how they met at a summer camp in 1962, how she always made him put up the Christmas lights even when she knew he hated heights. And the dogs. God, he loved those dogs. 3 old mutts back home, Buddy, June, and Pickle. He missed them like crazy. Every evening, he'd ask if anyone could bring them to visit, even though hospital policy didn't allow pets. We both knew it wasn't going to happen, but I never had the heart to say it outright. We grew close, in the quiet way nurses and patients sometimes do. I'd sit with him longer than I probably should have. Sometimes I'd forget I was on shift. I guess you could say I cared about him like family. And then one night, he was gone. He passed away in the early hours, just after I'd ended a double shift. I came back the next morning, checked the board, and saw the discharge note. Expired at 3:27. Peaceful. DNR honored. I stood there staring at the note like someone had pulled the floor out from under me. I didn't cry at first, I just kept working. Then later in the supply closet, it hit me. Hard. I leaned against the wall and sobbed into my sleeve until my head ached. About 6 weeks later, it was another overnight shift. We were short-staffed. Flu season had hit half the team. The ER was calm. ICU was stable. Around 2:15 a.m., Nina, one of the newer interns, realized we were out of oxygen tubing spares and asked if I could grab more from sub-level 2 storage. Now, St. Luke's was built in the late 1950s. It's a patchwork of old hallways, buzzing fluorescents and weird little corners where time seems to stop. Sub-level 2 is technically a basement. It's not used often, mostly for old equipment, expired stock, and boxes no one's bothered to organize in years. I'd been down there a few times before, during daylight hours. It was creepy, sure, but never terrifying. Just dusty and forgotten. But that night, the moment the elevator doors opened, something felt wrong. The air was cold, stale, like the place hadn't breathed in years. The lights flickered as I stepped out, casting long, broken shadows across the narrow hallway. The hum of the hospital above was gone. Down here, it was just silence. I walked to the supply cage, unlocked the gate, and grabbed the tubing pack from a labeled shelf. That's when I heard it. Soft footsteps behind me. Bare feet, slapping gently against tile. Not the echo of my own steps. Not a rat or a leak. Human footsteps. I spun around, heart thudding in my chest. Nothing. Empty hallway. Just the buzz of a flickering light and the distant clink of some pipe settling. I called out, "Hello?" No answer. Tried to laugh it off. Maybe it was just my nerves. Maybe the echo was weird down here. I started walking back, a little quicker this time. Then I heard it. "Emily." My name, whispered. Low, gravelly. His voice. Walter's voice. I stopped in my tracks. My throat tightened. I turned around again. Still no one there. "Emily." The voice came again. Closer. Behind me. I ran. I don't remember if I screamed. I just remember the hallway spinning as I bolted toward the elevator. The pack of tubing nearly slipped from my hands. I hit the call button a dozen times before the doors opened. When I got back upstairs, I didn't speak for almost 10 minutes. I handed the tubing to Nina with shaking hands and said I needed a minute. She asked me if I was okay. I said I was fine. I wasn't. I've never gone back down to sub-level 2 alone. I still think about that night more than I care to admit. I haven't heard Walter's voice again, but sometimes, when I walk the quiet halls past 3 a.m., I think I feel something. A presence, a shadow, a whisper. Maybe it was stress, maybe sleep deprivation, or maybe, just maybe, the people we care for don't always let go so easily. And maybe, just maybe, some of them linger not out of fear but out of love. I never liked working nights. Even before this happened, the night shift always brought a strange kind of loneliness. Too quiet, too still. I was always looking over my shoulder, especially in a town like Greystone. It wasn't dangerous exactly, just off. Small, rural, and surrounded by thick woods on all sides. with one major road running through it. That's where the Jiffy Mart sat, barely more than a glorified gas station, but I worked there part-time to cover some bills while I took online classes. This happened 2 years ago, late March. I still remember the weather. It had been raining all day. Then the skies cleared and the air got sharp and cold. The kind of cold that made you notice how empty the world felt at 3 a.m. I wasn't even supposed to be there that night. My coworker Sam had called out last minute, sick kid or something. My manager Evelyn phoned me in a panic asking if I could cover the 10 p.m. to 4 a.m. shift. I didn't want to say yes, I had barely slept the night before, but I also couldn't afford to say no. Rent was due, and Evelyn was kind to me. She'd let me study behind the counter during slow hours, so I told her I'd be there in 20. The store was about a 15-minute drive from my apartment. I threw on a hoodie, grabbed my keys, and drove through the empty roads with nothing but the sound of static on the radio. I pulled into the lot around 9:50 p.m. It was your typical night shift at first. A couple truckers, a drunk guy trying to buy hot dogs and scratchers, one college kid who bought nothing but energy drinks and ramen. I mostly sat behind the register scrolling through my coursework on my tablet. Every now and then I'd glance at the monitor showing the parking lot cams. Nothing unusual. Until around 1:30 a.m., the automatic doors slid open. I looked up. He walked in slow, early to mid-20s, lanky build, messy black hair, wearing a plain, oversized hoodie and cargo pants. Looked like he hadn't slept in days. What really caught me off guard, though, was the sound he made. Loud, strained yelling. Not words, just noise. Like someone trying to scream underwater. It echoed through the store and made my skin crawl. I tried to stay calm. My brother is on the spectrum and has some vocal tics, so my first thought wasn't fear. It was concern. "Hey man," I said, keeping my voice level. "You all right?" He didn't answer, just kept walking toward the counter, head tilted down, but his eyes, they weren't looking at me. They were staring straight up at the ceiling. I glanced at the monitor again. No car in the lot. No one else around. He got to the counter, planted both hands on it, and just stood there, making those noises. I felt uneasy now. Still, I tried again. "Do you need help? Is there someone I can call for you?" Nothing. He didn't move. Didn't even blink. Just stood there, breathing heavy, staring at the ceiling, yelling every few seconds. I glanced at the door, wondering if I should step out and call someone, maybe the non-emergency line. But if I did, he'd be left alone in the store. And I didn't want to provoke him. Trying to do something, anything, I grabbed a bag of chips from the rack behind me and held it out to him. "You hungry?" "Here. On the house. You can take it." He didn't reach for it. Didn't even acknowledge me. Just stood there for another minute, then suddenly turned around and walked out. No explanation, no words, just gone. I stared at the door for a long time, unsure if I'd just had a surreal but innocent encounter, or if something was wrong. I locked the doors after he left. Technically, we were supposed to keep them unlocked all night, but screw policy. I wasn't taking chances. I tried to shake it off, but I couldn't focus on my tablet anymore. I kept glancing outside. I even stepped out back once to check the dumpsters. Nothing. Then around 2:40 a.m., the store phone rang. It never rang at that hour. I picked it up. What I heard chilled me. That same yelling. Loud. Directly into the receiver. I froze. I didn't say a word, just slowly lowered the phone and hung up. My heart was pounding. I locked the office door and turned the lights down. I didn't feel safe anymore. I kept thinking, how did he get this number? It's not listed. You'd have to dig for it, or already know it. By the time 4 a.m. rolled around, I was counting down seconds. A new guy, Ray, was supposed to relieve me. As soon as he walked in, I bolted, mumbled something about needing sleep, and left without explanation. I drove home fast, barely stopping at lights. I got inside, locked every door and window, and tossed my bag on the kitchen table. I tried to tell myself it was over, just a weird night. No harm done. Then my phone rang. I hadn't even taken my shoes off. The screen showed private number. I didn't want to answer, but I did. And what I heard made me sick. That same yelling, through the phone. Louder this time. I dropped it. I couldn't breathe. For the rest of the night, I sat in my living room with the lights on and a knife on the coffee table. I could have sworn I heard creaking upstairs and then from the kitchen. But every time I checked, there was nothing. I didn't sleep. Eventually, the fear faded. Life moved on. I switched to day shifts. Told Evelyn I'd never work nights again. She didn't ask why. It wasn't until almost a month later that I realized something was seriously wrong. I went down into the basement to grab an old space heater. I hadn't been down there since winter started. The moment I stepped in, I saw the mess. Papers scattered across the floor. Some were my bank statements, old mail, my class notes. The closet door was slightly open. I felt this tightness in my chest. When I pulled the door open, I found writing on the walls, black Sharpie, scribbled all over the inside. Jiffy Mart. The store's full address, and my home address. The words repeated, overlapping like a chant. Worse, on the floor of the closet were kitchen knives, 4 of them, and one large hunting-style pocket knife, laid out neatly. I felt my knees go weak. He had been in my house, not just outside. In. I have no idea how long he was living down there. Days? Weeks? Maybe he'd followed me home that night. Maybe he was already inside before I got there. I never heard him come or go. I didn't call the police right away. I was too stunned, too scared they wouldn't believe me. I cleaned the place out, changed every lock, bought cameras, and even stayed with my cousin for a while. But he never came back. Never called again. The footage never showed anything. He vanished like smoke. There's a part of me that wonders if he ever meant to hurt me. Or if maybe, at the last second, something in his mind just broke the pattern, changed the plan. I'll never know. But I do know this. There's something about the night shift. When the world goes quiet and the shadows get long, you start to notice things that don't belong. And sometimes, if you're unlucky, those things notice you too. It started the same way every other night did. I pulled into the cracked parking lot behind Elmridge Memorial Park, headlights cutting through a thin veil of mist rolling low over the grass. My shift didn't technically begin until 11 p.m., but I always showed up early, 10:40, 10:45 at the latest. 17 years on this job and you pick up rituals, especially when your workspace happens to be a goddamn cemetery. Name's Mark Harlan. I'm 42 now. No military background, no combat stories, no ex-cop badge to polish. Just a high school graduate who applied for a night watch job when I was 25 and never found a good enough reason to leave. The pay's steady, the hours suck, but the night shift pays an extra $2 an hour and you don't have to talk to grieving families every day. That alone is worth the trade. The day shift has it rough, digging, guiding burials, dealing with clergy and logistics, and keeping everything tidy for the dozens of folks who come to cry over someone who's not coming back. My job, on the other hand, is simple. Keep the place secure, log my patrols, report anything unusual. That's it. And most nights there's nothing. No one. Just the dark, the wind, and rows of stone. What keeps you here? People always ask. Doesn't it creep you out, working there alone at night? I usually laugh and say, the dead never gave me trouble. That usually shuts them up. But truthfully, it's not the dead that keep me up, it's the ones who come looking for them. Over the years I've seen some shit. Drunk college kids on a dare. A couple of idiots trying to rob a grave thinking someone buried with gold jewelry. Weirdos who come in dressed in robes trying to perform rituals with bones and candle wax. Even caught a guy one time trying to exhume a dog buried with its owner. No idea why, but his eyes were off. Real office. But I'd never seen anything like what happened that night. I clocked in at 10:56 p.m. sharp. The day guy, Joel Barden, a quiet old vet who barely speaks more than necessary, nodded as he passed me the keys and his half-finished thermos of coffee. "Nothing to report," he muttered. "Quiet day?" "Yeah, one burial, left at 5. All clear." "All right, stay safe, Joel." He grunted and left like always. I locked the office behind me, a small one-room security shack near the maintenance shed, grabbed my flashlight and clipboard, and hopped into the golf cart. We've got 4 zones in Elmridge Memorial: North Ridge, Garden of Peace, Stonemount Lane, and the Forest Line. Takes about 20 minutes to circle the full grounds unless I stop to check something. I usually start my shift with one slow loop, then log it, grab something to eat back in the office, and then keep moving every couple hours. Like I said, routine. That night, everything was normal at first. I took my time, felt the cool October air on my face, let the hum of the cart and the rustle of the trees settle my thoughts. It was the kind of night I liked. Dry, still, quiet. That peace lasted until around 2:13 a.m. I was coming back up Stonemount when I noticed something near the east fence. A figure, standing still, barely illuminated in the distance by the cart's headlights. I stopped. At first I thought maybe it was just a headstone catching the light wrong. That happens. But then it moved. Subtle, like someone shifting their weight. Definitely a person. He was standing on the outside of the perimeter, hands at his sides, just watching. Didn't feel right. I didn't want to confront him directly. If it was a homeless guy or some paranoid drunk, no need to escalate. So I took the cart around the loop, planning to come back from a different angle to see if he'd moved or tried anything. 5 minutes. That's all it took. 5 minutes and he was gone. I stopped where he'd been standing. No footprints on the grass outside, no scuff marks on the gravel. I scanned the area with my flashlight, even walked the line of the fence for a while. Nothing. Figured he left. Maybe just a wanderer who changed his mind. But that's not what happened. By 2:40, I'd logged another lap and decided to swing by the spot one last time, more out of boredom than anything else. I figured I'd check, then head back and warm up some leftover spaghetti. But as soon as I turned down the path, I slammed on the brakes. He was back, not outside this time, inside. He was standing right on the gravel road, maybe 30 feet ahead, back to me, motionless. Same height, same posture, mid-40s, average build, plain jacket, just standing there like he'd been there all along. No gate was open, no holes in the fence. He was just there. I killed the engine and got out, keeping my flashlight low. "Sir?" I called out. "You're not supposed to be here." No response. I approached slowly, pulse tapping at my neck. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to come with me. You're trespassing." Still nothing. He didn't flinch, didn't even turn to look at me. He just stared straight ahead toward the chapel. I reached out, hesitant but firm, and touched his shoulder. That's when he moved. He whipped his head around and locked eyes with me. His face, pale, angry, like he was burning from the inside. The whites of his eyes looked bloodshot, not from drink or drugs, but something deeper. Something wrong. We stood there for maybe 4 seconds, just staring. Then he turned and walked away. Slow, calm, toward the fence. Didn't say a word. Didn't have to. Because something about that look, it rattled me. And I don't rattle easy. Nothing was the same after that night. The man, or whatever he was, never showed up again. At least not that I saw. But the place felt changed. The birds stopped singing at night. The air always seemed a little colder, like the ground itself was exhaling something old. And strangest of all, the chapel door, which we always kept locked, started turning up open in the mornings, and inside, faint tracks in the dust, like something had been pacing. I kept filing reports, logged everything, but without proof. No security footage, no witnesses. It all just sounded like a night guard losing his grip. paranoia. After a week of this, I made a decision. I was going to hide inside the chapel and wait. That night, I killed the lights, left the front door unlocked, and I slipped behind the old wooden pew near the back, flashlight off, holding my breath. For hours, nothing. Then, around 3:17 a.m., I heard it. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, gravel crunching just outside. Then the door creaked open. I didn't move. The footsteps came in. 1, 2, then silence. I could feel him there, could hear him breathing. But it wasn't normal. It was shallow, wet, like lungs not meant for air anymore. Then a whisper, right behind me. "You took the wrong shift." I turned, flashlight blinding, but there was no one. Just cold air, and a line of fresh dirt on the chapel floor, leading back out into the cemetery. The next morning, I handed in my badge. No notice, no explanation. 17 years, gone overnight. People ask why I left. I still just say the same thing. The dead never gave me trouble. But something else did. I never thought the midnight shift at a quiet roadside diner could change the entire course of my life. Back then, I was just trying to make ends meet, living in a small rented flat above a hardware store in a town nobody had heard of, Elmridge, tucked away somewhere between forgotten highways and endless pine forests. I had moved there a year earlier after dropping out of college. Too many bills, too little motivation, and a family back home that thought I was wasting my time chasing dreams. I needed work, any work, and that's how I ended up at Maggie's 24-hour diner, a place where the coffee never stopped brewing and the jukebox still played 80s hits long after midnight. My shift ran from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., the kind of hours most people avoid. But I liked the stillness, the predictable rhythm. Most nights it was just me and Luis, the cook, mid-50s, ex-military, and a man of very few words. He'd play classic rock on his little Bluetooth speaker in the kitchen while flipping burgers with surgical precision. The customers were usually truckers pulling through on long hauls, the occasional drunk college kids trying to sober up after a party, or lonely insomniacs looking for a warm place and someone to talk to. Over time, I got to know their faces and quirks. I even found a strange comfort in their habits. And then he started coming in. He called himself Martin. Maybe 40, maybe a little older. Bald, thick beard, and always in that worn-out navy trench coat like he was trying too hard to look unassuming. At first, he was just part of the background noise. Came in between 2 a.m. and 3 a.m., always sat at the counter, ordered a black coffee and a plain donut. He never talked much. Just sat there with his elbows on the counter, staring at the sugar dispenser or the rain sliding down the windows. I didn't pay him much attention until he began showing up every night. Not every few days. Every single night. His presence started to feel deliberate. At first, it was subtle. The way his eyes followed me around the diner. How he never looked at the menu anymore, just at me. One night he asked, "You ever feel scared working here all alone?" It came out casually, like small talk. But his tone carried something colder, something sharp beneath the surface. I laughed it off. "I've got Luis in the back," I replied. "Besides, I've got my own coffee pot weapon if anything goes down." I tried to keep it light, but my stomach twisted. Then came the tips, not your regular change or dollar bills. I mean $20, $50, even once a $100 bill folded neatly beneath his empty mug. I should have been grateful, but in my experience, no man hands over that kind of money for no reason. And Martin? He was looking for something. One night, after weeks of quiet conversation, he slid something across the counter wrapped in tissue paper. "Saw this and thought of you," he said with that same half smile that didn't reach his eyes. It was a necklace, cheap but thoughtful. Too thoughtful. I didn't take it. Politely declined. "I can't accept gifts from customers," I said. He shrugged but left it on the counter. I threw it out as soon as his car's taillights disappeared into the fog. Then came the comment. I'll never forget. It was a Tuesday. Rain outside. No other customers. Luis had stepped out back for a smoke. Martin leaned forward and said, "You ever think about how easy it'd be for someone to take you from here? This late, no one around." His voice was soft, thoughtful, like he was talking about the weather. But my blood went cold. I smiled, forced a laugh. "You watch too many crime shows." He smiled back and kept staring. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the conversation over and over. I thought about telling Luis, but I didn't want to sound dramatic. Besides, Martin hadn't done anything. Not really. The next night, he didn't show up. And for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe. But just as I was closing up, the phone rang. "Maggie's Diner. This is Claire," I answered, half expecting a drunk order for pancakes. Silence. Then a long, breathy sigh. And then, "Did you miss me?" I froze. My heart pounded in my ears. It was him. His voice was so close, so clear, I could almost feel his breath. I hung up. I locked the doors, double-checked the windows, told Luis. He shrugged it off. Creeps call all the time. Ignore it. But the calls didn't stop. Every night. The same silence, the same whisper, different words. "I saw what you wore tonight. Your hair looked nice up like that. You're all alone again, aren't you?" I changed my phone number. Twice. He still found me. The police told me they couldn't trace the calls unless he made threats. That I needed more evidence. They didn't see the way I shook every time the phone rang. They didn't hear his voice crawl into my ears like a worm. Weeks passed. I was barely holding it together. Then came the night he returned. It was exactly 3:06 a.m. The bell above the door jingled. I looked up. There he was. He stood there like he owned the place. Calm, casual. That same trench coat drenched from the rain. He walked to the counter, sat down and said, "Why'd you stop answering?" I didn't reply. I couldn't. I was frozen. He leaned in. "I'm not leaving until you talk to me." I looked toward the back, praying Luis would come out. Nothing. I picked up the phone. He lunged forward, grabbing my wrist hard. "I just want to talk," he hissed, his grip tightening. That's when instinct took over. My other hand flew to the coffee pot, hot, full, and heavy. I swung it with everything I had. It cracked against his head. He stumbled back, groaning. I didn't wait. I ran, screamed for Luis. By the time we got back to the front, Martin was gone. The police took it seriously now. Saw the bruises. Took statements. Looked at camera footage. But they never found him. I quit the next morning. I changed my number again. Moved to a new city. New job. New life. And eventually, back home to live with my sister until I could sleep through the night without checking every shadow. People think horror is blood and ghosts. But real horror, it's the quiet smile of a man who sees you as prey. It's the way the world shrinks when no one believes you're in danger. It's surviving and still not feeling safe. That was 2 years ago. I haven't seen Martin since, but I still check my phone for blocked calls. And every time a man sits at a counter alone, I wonder, what if it's him? It had been a few months since I left Elmridge. Now I lived in Fairview, a slightly bigger and safer town, sharing an apartment with my older sister Kira. Her building had a front desk, cameras, and a buzzer system that only worked for registered visitors. For the first time in ages, I had a small chain lock on my bedroom door. Not because I really needed it, but because it helped me sleep. I started working a day shift at a small bookstore cafe. The customers there were quiet, kind, and predictable. No strangers stared too long, and no unknown number kept calling me in the dead of night. But some things hadn't changed. I still flinched when I saw my own reflection in glass late at night. I still avoided standing too close to anyone in elevators. Every time the phone rang, even now, my heart skipped a beat. Martin was never found. The police later told me his name was likely fake. The last security camera footage showed him walking out of Maggie's diner and disappearing into the fog. After that, nothing. No license plate, no trace. Like he had vanished into thin air. And yet, I never really felt like he was gone. I tried to move on. Therapy helped. My sister helped. I started journaling, going on walks, letting myself feel normal things again. Some nights I even forgot the sound of his voice. But then there was that one day. It was a rainy morning in October. I was restocking some books by the window when a man walked past. Tall, beard, long coat. It wasn't him. I knew it wasn't him. Still, I stood there, frozen. He didn't look back. He kept walking down the street and disappeared into the crowd. I laughed at myself a little, shook it off, went back to work. Later that afternoon, while closing the register, my phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. I didn't answer it. I let it ring, let the voicemail pick it up, and told myself it could be anything, a spam call, a wrong number, a company survey. But I couldn't help it. Later that night, I played the voicemail. There was nothing but static, and then a pause and a whisper. Still pretty, even when you're scared. Click. That night, I didn't sleep, but I didn't run either, because this time I knew something Martin didn't. I wasn't the same girl anymore. I had just turned 26 when I took the night shift job at Silver Pines Care Facility, tucked away on the outskirts of a quiet little town called Westridge. I won't lie, this job wasn't my first choice. But after a rocky few years and a long overdue stint in rehab, I was in no position to be picky. I needed steady work, a clean routine, and space from all the people and places that reminded me of my past. In some twisted way, the silence of night shifts seemed like exactly what I needed. No pressure, no judgment, just me and my tasks. I was a maintenance guy. Nothing glamorous, changing light bulbs, fixing heating issues, cleaning up minor messes, and making sure the place didn't fall apart during the night. The job started at 7 p.m. and ended at 6 a.m. Most nights were uneventful. Most. Silver Pines wasn't your regular old-age home. It was a massive horseshoe-shaped campus with modern architecture and huge glass windows that made you feel like you were never really alone, even when you were. The front of the building was all warm light and soft music, the kind of place that tried hard to feel like a five-star hotel for the elderly. But after dark, something about it shifted. Each evening there was a 2-hour window between 7 p.m. and 9 p.m. when the common areas buzzed with life. Card games, light jazz from a Bluetooth speaker, some residents doing laps around the indoor walking track, the occasional argument about politics, and always the smell of microwaved popcorn or ginger tea wafting through the halls. It was the only part of my shift I looked forward to. There was something comforting about it. These folks had stories, jokes, warmth. They reminded me of the grandparents I'd never had. But at exactly 9 p.m., like clockwork, it all changed. The residents shuffled off to their private suites. The halls went quiet, and I was left alone in that massive, glass-walled building. That's when the feeling would hit. Something like a shift in air pressure, like a silent weight pressing against my chest. I'd start to dread the hours ahead, and no amount of logic or self-talk could explain it away. At first, I chalked it up to post-rehab anxiety, lingering paranoia maybe. But soon, I realized it wasn't just me. It started with glimpses. I'd be walking down one hallway, let's say the East Wing, and through the glass, I'd see a silhouette walking in the West Wing, moving in near perfect synchronization with me. At first, I assumed it was my own reflection, but it wasn't. The figure's pace was slightly delayed, as if it were copying me, watching, waiting. I'd turn a corner to catch it head on. Nothing. Just the cold, empty hallway stretching into darkness. After the third or fourth time I stopped trying to explain it, I just noted it. Every night around the same time, same place, same figure. But it never came too close. Not until that one night. That night, I still dream about it sometimes. It was late November and the nights had started to get bitterly cold. Around midnight, I made my usual walk toward the cafeteria. We didn't have an official break room, so the staff usually shared the residents' coffee bar, a cozy corner space with a few vending machines, a pot of weak coffee, and a retro microwave that buzzed louder than it cooked. As I rounded the corner, I nearly collided with Priya, one of the hospice nurses. She was small, sharp-witted, and always had an extra snack tucked in her bag, just in case. She laughed when she saw my face, clearly startled, and said, "You look like you saw a ghost." I mumbled, trying to recover. We shared a quiet coffee and chatted for a few minutes before her pager buzzed and she headed back to the palliative wing. Those quick chats helped more than I realized. Being able to talk to someone, anyone, made the silence bearable. Over the following weeks, I grew used to seeing Priya or Nurse Greg once or twice during my shift. It was just enough to keep me grounded. Just enough to forget the figure in the hallway. But nothing good lasts forever. The cul-de-sac, as we called it, was the far end of the West Wing. A dead-end hallway that housed the therapy room, a small gym, and a few empty offices. It also bordered the palliative care wing. I avoided cleaning that area at night if I could help it, but protocol was protocol. One night, probably close to 3 a.m., I was vacuuming near the therapy room when I felt that presence again. It wasn't just nerves. It was the unmistakable feeling that someone was watching me. I turned around expecting to see one of the nurses, but the hallway was empty. That's when I noticed movement outside. Through the wide back window, just past the dim glow of a walkway lamp, stood something, a figure. At first I thought it was a statue, maybe one of the facility's garden sculptures, but there was no sculpture there. It was tall, unnaturally so, 8 feet at least. Its legs were barely visible, almost like they melted into the ground. Its upper body was pale, bluish-white like a drowned corpse, ribs protruding from thin, stretched skin. Its arms hung low, fingers ending in pointed claw-like tips. 3, maybe 4 fingers. I froze. Then it turned its head toward me. Its face was not human. It looked like the skull of a goat. Hollow, jagged eye sockets, curling horns, and matted hair hanging in greasy locks. But what terrified me the most was the feeling that hit me the moment its eyes locked with mine. It wasn't fear. It was everything. Grief. Hopelessness. Regret. It was like someone had cracked open my chest and poured every bad memory, every failure, every pain I'd ever buried straight into my bloodstream. I felt like I was drowning in despair that wasn't even mine. Childhood trauma, lost friends, every lie I'd told, every overdose, all of it. I dropped to my knees. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I curled up on the floor, sobbing, gasping for air like I'd been punched in the gut by the weight of the entire world. And then, just as suddenly, it was gone. The figure, the pressure, the emotion. I dragged myself to my feet and looked outside again. Nothing. Just the cold sidewalk and the faint hum of the lamppost. I never saw it again. Not like that. But after that night, I felt it. I felt it in the walls, in the silence, in the way the air grew heavy after 9 p.m. I avoided the West Wing as much as I could, and when I had to go there, I made sure I wasn't alone. Years later, when I finally quit and moved out of Westridge, I tried to forget it all, but I never could. I sometimes wonder about the residents, those in palliative care. Did they feel it too? Did they see it? I still don't have answers. I don't know if what I saw was a demon, a ghost, or something far older than either, but I know what I felt, and I know it was real. I knew something was wrong the second I heard footsteps behind me. It was the kind of quiet only found in forgotten parts of the city. You know, where the streetlights flicker like they're clinging to life and the wind carries trash in slow spirals through alleys that haven't seen a broom in years. This was the industrial edge of Eastfield, somewhere between the decaying warehouses and the highway that cut the city in two like an old scar. Let me rewind for a second. Back in 2007, I was 28, already tired of the 9-to-5 grind, and working a midnight shift as a recovery agent for a rent-to-own company called Easy Home Goods. Sound cushy? It wasn't. On paper, my job was about accounts and collections. In reality, it meant knocking on doors at 2 a.m. and asking strangers for their TV back. I lived alone in a barely standing apartment on the west side of the city. I didn't choose Eastfield. It just kinda happened. Cheaper rent, no questions asked, and plenty of dark corners to disappear into. That year had already been a mess. My dad had passed away the winter before, and with him went the last bit of sanity in our family. I inherited his worn-down truck, his temperament, and something I didn't notice until later, his weird magnetism for chaos. I'm serious. If there was one unhinged person in a crowd of 50, they'd find me. Bus stations, gas stations, midnight diners, it didn't matter. Maybe I had that look. The one that says, "Talk to me, I won't run." Anyway, that night, I wasn't working the usual rounds. I had pulled into the company's lot behind the strip mall we operated out of to check on our old cargo van. It had been giving us trouble, and rather than call a mechanic, my boss figured I could tinker with it. He wasn't wrong. I knew my way around a wrench thanks to my old man. It was just past 11:30 p.m. when I parked my truck beside the van and climbed out, toolbox in hand. The lot was dead quiet. A couple dumpsters sat across the cracked concrete, and beyond that, a chain-link fence separated us from a patch of overgrown brush and the rusted freight tracks. I remember thinking, damn, it's unusually still tonight. The air was heavy and warm, the kind of night where sweat clings to your back even if you're standing still. I tossed a piece of cardboard onto the pavement, lay down, and slid halfway under the van. That's when I heard it. Footsteps. Quick ones. I slid out just in time to see a kid, couldn't have been more than 20, sprinting across the lot. He was pale, panicked, and glancing over his shoulder like the devil himself was chasing him. He didn't even see me until he was right next to the dumpsters. I shouted, "Hey man, you all right?" No answer, just a wild glance. He ducked behind the middle dumpster, crouching low. Okay, I thought, that's not just weird, that's bad news weird. 30 seconds later, I heard more footsteps, heavier this time. I turned, and out of the darkness emerged a stocky man in a hoodie and jeans, maybe late 30s, beard, ball cap pulled low. There was a certain stillness to him, the kind that sets off every internal alarm. His eyes locked on me like I was the only other person in the world. "Where'd he go?" he barked. Instinct took over. I pointed at the dumpsters. I don't know why I did it. I hadn't seen a weapon. Maybe it was the way he moved, confident, like he wasn't chasing someone. He was claiming something. We walked toward the dumpsters together, him a few steps behind. That's when it all went sideways. From nowhere, he pulled a black handgun and raised it in one fluid motion. "Get the fuck out here," he shouted. I froze. Time stopped. My stomach sank. The crouching kid slowly stood, arms raised. "Don't shoot," the kid muttered. The man grabbed him by the collar, threw him to the ground. "You think you can run on me, huh?" That's when the truck appeared, old Dodge Ram, screeching around the far end of the plaza, fishtailing like something out of a movie. It barreled toward us, slamming to a stop just feet from the kid. The passenger door flew open. 2 more men jumped out, both armed, both yelling. Another guy in the bed of the truck climbed down. He looked younger, maybe early 30s, but no less serious. No badges, no uniforms, just plain clothes and cold eyes. One of them yanked the kid off the ground and shoved him into the back of the truck. "Face down," he barked. The others kept their guns trained on him. In seconds, the truck sped off, vanishing into the night. Silence. I stood there behind the van, heart racing, wondering if I'd just witnessed a kidnapping or a drug bust. No one said anything to me. No one even looked at me. They didn't care I was there. That's what scared me the most. I sat there for a while, just trying to process it. Eventually, I walked inside the store and found Luis, one of the stock guys, sweeping up. "You won't believe what I just saw," I said, launching into the story. Luis didn't even look up. This city's a magnet for that kind of somyo, man. That was it. No concern, no follow-up. I guess I was the only one still shocked by the madness behind the building. A half hour later, I was still under the van when I noticed two shadows moving beyond the dumpsters, flashlights weaving through the brush. The men weren't shouting, just scanning the ground like they'd lost something. Drugs? A weapon? Evidence? They didn't find whatever it was. After 10 minutes, they vanished into the brush and never came back. I never saw any of them again. I never told the cops. Truth is, I wasn't sure if I'd just helped someone get abducted or if I'd pointed a felon toward justice. Both possibilities haunted me. Still do sometimes. That job messed me up. I stuck around for another year, but by the end of it, I wasn't myself anymore. Drinking too much, sleeping too little. I had dreams about that truck. Those eyes. I eventually left Eastfield, got out, got clean, found work fixing motorcycles out in New Mexico. But some nights, when I'm driving back from the shop and the desert's quiet, I think about that parking lot behind Easy Home Goods. I think about the kid's eyes, about the gun, about how easily I said, "He went that way." Some stories stick to your ribs like that. I've got more if you're up for 'em. Like the night I almost got thrown out a second-story window by a woman half my size. But that's a different kind of horror. One for another midnight. I wasn't even supposed to be driving that night. The plan was for my older cousin Jake to take the late shift. He's always been the night owl, the kind of guy who drives with one hand on the wheel and a Red Bull in the cup holder. But around 9 p.m., somewhere on a long stretch of Highway 287 between Wichita Falls and Amarillo, Jake started getting nauseous out of nowhere. Said his head was spinning, and his stomach felt like it was tying itself in knots. So it ended up being me, Caleb Walker, 38 at the time, behind the wheel of our old Ford Explorer, with my mom, Deborah, in the passenger seat, and my sister, Rachel, half asleep in the back. We were heading to see my uncle out in Flagstaff, Arizona. A spontaneous road trip. My mom had just retired, and Rachel had finished a tough semester teaching middle school. It felt like the right time to get away from everything. Just family, open roads, cheap motels, and gas station snacks. We hadn't done anything like this since Dad died 3 years earlier. There was something sacred about the silence of the road and the hum of tires beneath us. At around 11:15 p.m., the gas light came on. Rachel stirred in the back seat. "We should stop soon. We're almost on E." "Yeah," I said, scanning the dark road ahead. "There's got to be something soon." The highway was empty. No cars, no signs of civilization, just trees, shadows, and that sticky kind of southern night heat that made your skin feel like it was holding its breath. Just when I started to feel that anxious itch in my chest, wondering if we'd run out of gas in the middle of nowhere, my mom pointed ahead. "There," she said. "Is that a sign?" It was. Rest stop, 2 miles, food, gas, open 24 hours. "Finally," I muttered, more relieved than anything. We pulled off at the exit 2 miles later. No name on the sign, just rest stop, and a faded logo that looked like it hadn't been updated since the 80s. The place looked off, even from the start. One lone building, a couple of flickering streetlights, one diesel pump. It sat on a clearing surrounded by trees that seemed way too tall, like they were leaning in closer than they should have been. Out front, there were a few vehicles. An old Dodge van with teenagers leaning against it smoking, and a small gray sedan with 2 men standing silently beside it, staring ahead like statues. "Maybe it's just a weird crowd," Rachel mumbled as we parked. The lights inside the convenience store were on, but the place looked dead. Jake was still in the back, curled up with a hoodie over his face. He hadn't said a word in over an hour. I figured I'd fill up and grab some coffee. Rachel and Mom went inside to use the bathroom. That's when things started to get strange. The teenagers were murmuring among themselves. I caught one of them saying, "It's like, this place isn't even real, man." They were laughing, but there was nervousness in their voices. One of the girls lit a cigarette with shaking hands. I inserted my card into the pump. Nothing happened. The screen was blank. Tried again. Nothing. I looked around. No station attendant in sight. No buzzing of a freezer. No background music. Just silence. Heavy, unnatural silence like the kind you hear in basements during a power outage. Then I noticed the two men by the gray sedan, still standing there, not talking, not even shifting their weight. One of them turned his head toward me, and I swear his eyes were pitch black, not like dark brown or shadowy. I mean black. No whites, no shine, just pits. That's when Rachel came sprinting out of the store, grabbing my arm. "Caleb, we need to leave now." "What happened?" She was pale. "There's no one inside. It's completely empty. Like abandoned. No cashier, no stock on the shelves. The lights are on, but it's like no one's been here in years." Just then my mom stepped out of the building behind her, and even she looked rattled. She's usually calm, the one who tells us to get a grip, but she was clutching her purse like she was in a bad neighborhood at midnight. I didn't ask more questions. We got back in the SUV and peeled out of there, gravel kicking up behind the tires. We didn't stop again until we reached Amarillo. Later, when we were safe, we pulled up Google Maps. Checked everywhere between Wichita Falls and Amarillo. No such rest stop appeared. Nothing that matched what we saw. No business name. No building even remotely resembling it on Street View. The next day, we asked the receptionist at the motel about it. She looked confused. "Only gas station on that stretch closed down 6 years ago. Burned in a fire. Nothing left but concrete now." We thought maybe we'd gotten turned around. Maybe it was a dream. Stress. Hallucination. But we all remembered the same thing. The black-eyed men. The dead pump. The empty store with the lights on. The heat that felt just a little too thick. About a month later, Rachel stumbled on a news article. A family of 4 had gone missing on Highway 287 around the same area. Their car was found a few days later. Doors open, headlights on, engine dead. They were found wandering several miles away, barefoot and disoriented. The kids couldn't speak for days. When interviewed, the father said something we'll never forget. "It was like we pulled off the road and found a place that wasn't meant to be found. Like it didn't want us to leave. We don't talk about it much. People would think we're making it up. Hell, I would have thought I was making it up if I hadn't been there. But every time we drive that stretch again, which we try not to, we look for it. And we never find it." I never thought working the graveyard shift at a gas station would be anything more than boring. But sometimes, boring is exactly what you want. Back in 2018, I was in my senior year of high school, living in a small town called Brayfield, tucked between cornfields and forgotten highways in Illinois. Not the kind of place people write stories about. It was quiet. Too quiet sometimes. But I guess that's what made what happened that night even more disturbing. My name's Tyler Morgan. I wasn't the kind of kid who had time for parties or football games. After my dad walked out when I was 15, my mom took on 2 jobs to keep us afloat. That left me to step up, especially for my little brother Eli. Rent wasn't cheap even in a place like Brayfield, and by 17 I was working part-time at a gas station called Red River Fuel, just off Route 39. It wasn't glamorous. The night shifts were long, the pay was minimum wage, and the coffee machine always smelled like burnt plastic. But it helped. And for a long time, I told myself that was enough. I had gotten used to the usual rhythm. Drunks stumbling in after the bar closed. Truckers stopping for a quick coffee or directions. The occasional stoner giggling their way through the snack aisle. Most nights, I sat behind the counter with my earbuds in, scrolling through Reddit or solving Sudoku puzzles on my phone. Just trying to pass the time. But this one night, This one night was different. It was a Friday, right before Halloween, October 26th to be exact. I remember it clearly because I wasn't supposed to work that night. I had planned to catch a horror movie marathon with Eli. But at 6:30 p.m., my phone buzzed with a text from my manager, Rachel. "Can you cover tonight? Jason bailed again." I almost ignored it. I really wanted that night off. But Mom was already working late, and the extra hours would mean I could finally buy Eli those sneakers he kept talking about. So I replied, "Yeah, I got it," tossed on my hoodie, and headed out. By 8 p.m., I was behind the counter running through the opening checklist. The station was dead, like usual. A few people came and went, grabbing gas, beer, or cigarettes. Nothing out of the ordinary. I watched the security monitors while munching on stale chips from the break room. Then, around 2:15 a.m., something shifted. A car pulled into the lot. A beat-up dark blue Pontiac Grand Am. Headlights dim like the battery was dying. I leaned forward and squinted at the monitor. One person inside. Driver's side door opened. Out stepped a woman, maybe early 30s. Shoulder-length black hair, pale skin, oversized hoodie, jeans that looked soaked at the cuffs. She stood there for a second, staring directly at the security camera above the door. Not like she noticed it, more like she was studying it. She finally walked in, and the door chime made me jump. The woman didn't say anything, just started mumbling under her breath. I tried to catch a word or two, but it was low, rushed. Something about "he said he'd be back," and a name that sounded like David. I cleared my throat. "You doing all right, ma'am?" She didn't answer, just walked slowly down the snack aisle, dragging her fingers across the bags of chips like she was trying to feel something. I kept an eye on her from the counter. Something about her set me on edge. She was nervous, biting her nails, looking over her shoulder like someone might be following her. I figured maybe she was high. Meth wasn't unheard of in Brayfield. Eventually, she picked up a single candy bar. A Three Musketeers, I remember, because it was the last one in the box. She walked up to the counter, staring at me the whole time. "That'll be $1.29, I said, trying to keep it light. She didn't move, didn't reach for a purse, didn't even blink. Instead, she whispered, "David told me you'd be here." My stomach tightened. "I'm sorry. Do I know you?" Her eyes widened and she whispered again. "He said you'd know what to do when the time comes." I looked around. The place was empty. The parking lot outside was dark. No other cars. I glanced at the panic button under the counter just in case. "Ma'am, I think you might be. Do you hear that?" She cut in. "Hear what?" "The breathing, it's right behind you." I froze. There was nothing, just the hum of the refrigerators, the buzz of the lights overhead. She suddenly screamed, a sharp, piercing sound that made me flinch. Then just like that, she turned around and walked straight out of the store, got in her car and peeled off into the night. For a minute, I just stood there, heart racing. I figured maybe it was a prank, or someone having a mental health episode. I almost called the cops, but what would I even say? A woman came in, said some weird stuff, then left. So I wrote it off, tried to focus on finishing the shift. But the weirdness wasn't over. At 4:38 a.m., my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I let it ring out. Then another call, and another. I finally picked up on the third ring, frustrated. "Hello?" There was only static. Then, faintly, a whisper. "David, David, David." It kept repeating, growing louder, more distorted, until it didn't even sound human anymore. Just this screeching, animal-like howl that made my skin crawl. I hung up and dropped my phone. I didn't sleep when I got home. I just sat in the living room until the sun came up. Next day, I went to the station and asked Rachel to pull the security footage. She found the car pulling in, found the woman walking up to the store. But here's the part that still chills me. There's no footage of her ever entering. One second, she's walking toward the door. The next, she's gone. No door chime. No record of the candy bar sale. No voice, no scream, nothing. Like she just vanished. I changed my number the next day, and I never worked another night shift again.